I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief at pharmaphorum. I'm here with Lisa Yañez, CEO of Aerami Therapeutics. We're here at JP Morgan. We're at the Fairmont Hotel. Found a quiet corner, and she's going to tell me a little bit about her show, her company, and herself. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Jonah. How are you?
Doing great. So,
Good.
So tell me a little bit about what brings you here. You were telling me before we started recording about Aerami and the rare disease space and how you got into that. Give us a little bit of background there.
Yeah, of course. So I've been working in the industry for 26 years, basically my entire career, with predominantly a focus on rare disease. And I have been focusing on pulmonary arterial hypertension, which is what Aerami has as their actual lead asset. And so over time, I've really loved to learn and grow and enjoy this particular rare disease. And prior to that, I had worked at two other PAH-focused rare disease companies before coming to Aerami, managing kind of a portfolio of products for the PAH patients. One thing that really drove me, though, was really trying to find a product that actually affects the underlying cause of the disease, and that led me to smaller kind of organizations and led me to Aerami. I believe that they have the best drug device combination, and we've actually just completed our phase 1 study. So what I'd like to do is build out a phase 2 study to initiate that in the first part of this year. And I came to JP Morgan to ensure that we have the funding in order to do it effectively.
So it's a drug device combination. Tell me a little bit about that. How does it work?
Yes, exactly. So in this particular disease area, a lot of the drugs are meant to kind of affect the vasodilation and affect the symptoms, and many of them are very burdensome. So you have pump therapies, you have kind of clunky inhalers that are, multiple times a day, and you also have oral products that sometimes create a lot of GI upset, nausea, diarrhea, things like that. It's a rare disease, right? So these patients have it chronically. They're going to have to take these medicines for the rest of their life. And there are 15 approved therapies, and many of them work on 3 pathways. But there's no cure, and the median survival rate is still 5 to 7 years.
And these existing therapies, they treat the symptoms.
They effectively treat the symptoms, but they're not actually affecting the pulmonary vasculature. What happens is the vasculature actually proliferates and actually creates it's really, really hard for these patients to breathe, and it's really, really hard to pump the blood between the heart and the lungs. So what ends up happening is they end up dying oftentimes because of right heart failure. And so what we're trying to do is take what we know, a drug that actually worked in an oral format. Novartis had done a phase 3 study in PAH patients and shown some of the largest PVR reduction and benefits, which is one of the key endpoints to really look at whether or not these patients are getting better. However, that drug they didn't move forward with because it had a lot of GI upsets, a lot of patients couldn't tolerate it, a lot of patients dropped out from the trial. So the theory here is, taking an actual improved inhaler that's currently being used in PAH outside the US and being able to actually utilize that, which is kind of a patient-friendly proven device, and couple it with the drug that we know works in PAH and really help to achieve the therapeutic, doses in the lungs that we want to achieve. So we can get to like lower dose. Hypothesis is up to 10 times lower dose, but get it right to the site, right, and really impact the outcomes for these patients. So I think it's a really high value, kind of low risk proposition, and something that I've been working with the key physicians, for many years in terms of clinical development, to build out kind of this phase 2 study to help the patients.
So rare disease actually has been a super interesting area for me to learn about as I've gotten into the pharma space, because there are so many difficulties to the incentives because there's so few patients, high need. It's hard to find larger companies that will invest in something where the addressable market is so small. And there are some that are doing it in various ways for various reasons. But how is it for you being in the rare disease space? If you come to an event like this, you're looking for partners, you're looking for investors. When to be able to convince them that this is worthwhile, it's making an impact, even though there may not be that many patients.
Yeah, I think part of it's kind of twofold, right? One of it is to help people understand the unmet needs, and if you're actually looking at something that effectively, helps the underlying cause, I think that's always important to kind of, relay that information, relay that story. I think another thing is the passion and kind of experience of the team, being able to actually make sure people understand these patients. There's about 70,000 patients in the US and EU, predominantly women of childbearing age. They have really poor kind of quality of life. It takes them 2 years to be diagnosed on average, and then they've got 5 to 7 years to live, right? Who wouldn't want to help? But then it also comes down to dollars and cents, right? We're here, we're looking at investment opportunities. And so I think meaningfully, we're a private company. So what I'm trying to do is be able to relay comparatives and be able to say, hey, this particular product within PAH is valued at this, and this is what it does. Here's conceivably what inhaled imatinib could do, and let's take a look at what it might be able to achieve. And also, we've got a really smart phase 2 study. So unlike some of the contemporary studies where rare disease, they have a lot of patients kind of in terms of the overall N of the study, we're not looking at having to prove that imatinib works in PAH. We're needing to prove the hypothesis that this inhaled imatinib is effective and is able to demonstrate what was shown previously with regards to PDR.
So it's the whole package.
So it's the whole package. It's, we're doing it, very intentionally. We've got an intentional study with the right number of patients. We have a passion for this. We've got an experienced team. The folks that are heading up the clinical development have actually worked in PAH. We've designed trials, we work together. And then effectively being able to show what other companies have done without even, getting to some of the enormous benefits that we hope to achieve with this particular product, because it does behave differently in terms of anti-proliferation and reverse remodeling, and kind of trying to get that heart back, the right heart enlarged, trying to get it back to more of a normal state. So I think it's selling part of the company and the story, but also being able to demonstrate and show that there has been profit opportunities in the past within this rare disease. It's kind of, and it's also nice too to talk to investors who are actually focused in on rare and or orphan diseases. I think that helps a lot.
Right, and there is a contingent there, right, of investors and even of pharma companies that are tackling it.
Exactly, completely, yes.
One question I'm asking everybody I'm talking to, we're going to use this for our videos and for our deep dive feature, is this conference is a lot about looking ahead to the next year. So what are the big R&D trends that you see sort of dominating 2023 in pharma?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. So in terms of R&D trends, I think what I'm seeing in particular, given the nature of what's happening right now within the markets, is I think people are doubling down on what they know. And so as an example, we have a couple other programs, but because Aerami 901 is so important to us, we've really prioritized that. So from a R&D perspective, we're probably taking less of a risk in terms of the opportunity that we see with this program. And we're probably going to hold off a little bit on some of our earlier potential platform opportunities to make sure that we get it right. And I don't know if other companies are doing that or not, but realistically, because the funds are a little bit tighter, I think in a way it can be good and bad, right? It really forces you to prioritize and right size, which is good. I mean, it's good for, it's good for shareholders, it's good for patients,
Right.
I hope that the markets get better and that, looking forward, we can be a little bit more nimble and a little bit more provocative with some of the existing, molecules and things like that. But, as a realist, I think, it's a little different than the last, 10, 15 years that I've been working in clinical development within rare disease. So it's basically more choiceful.
But it forces you to really focus on the things that you believe in, and
it does.
Yeah, push them forward.
It does. And in a way, it almost creates more emphasis and focus on getting it right. Every single endpoint counts. The protocol counts. Sitting down and talking to the physicians and the patients, talking to the clinical coordinators that actually help to institute these things is crucial. It's also crucial in our current landscape to really understand, things have changed relative to people being at home more, and what's the state of affairs in terms of people, number of times that the patients need to, actually go into the clinic, and how do you utilize some of these decentralized trials and, R&D options that I think force people to be more creative, which I think is actually a really good thing in a way, in terms of coaching, being there for the patients, with therapeutic options that do require a drug device, you're going to want that training and teaching. But how can you also make sure and follow through and help the patients with adherence and compliance and coaching efforts? I think that it's going to change in a positive way with regards to that, because now people are thinking about, okay, how do these different people actually live their lifestyle? And for PAH, and we're also looking at PH-ILD, oftentimes these patients, they're not ones that are always out, right? They're having trouble breathing. They're not feeling good. They're feeling dizzy. They don't have the energy that they used to have. And so being able to design trials that will allow them to meaningfully still capture the data and information endpoints that you need, but to be able to actually, institute that, I think, that was maybe one good outcome potentially of like the COVID situation, because people had novelty in terms of how they design, R&D efforts. So I know we're definitely thinking about things like that.
Some things are hard to innovate in pharma because there's risk averseness and there's negative momentum.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree more with that. Yes.
Your answer there kind of got into something I wanted to ask you about, because I could tell this is something that you spend a lot of time thinking about, which is about kind of patient centricity and the patient voice and getting the input of the patients who actually live with this disease, which is something I think is getting a lot more, at least lip service in the last few years. And I think some real action on from across the industry. But how do you guys think of that? What are some of the feedback mechanisms you use to make sure that you're building something that really works for the patient and their experience?
I'm so glad you're asking this question. So one of the things I've learned in clinical development, particularly in rare disease, is go out and talk to folks, right? Talk to the physicians, but not just talk to the physicians, talk to the clinical coordinators, the nurses who are actually like helping teach the patients in terms of what to do, how to do. And they're also the ones in the clinic actually making sure that they're looking at all the respective data inputs that are required. But most importantly, I think, is work with the associations and the patients. So before we actually, finalize the protocol, what I always make sure that the team does, and I'm actually involved in as well, is actually listen to the patients. Okay, so here's the study that we're trying to design. We want to make it as easy as possible, but we need to balance out the data that we need to get in order to move the program forward. What works, what doesn't work? And by just doing that upfront, actual true questioning, we actually have a nurse advisory board on Thursday this week. So one of my colleagues is leading efforts on that to go out and talk to them and say, hey, what do the patients want? What's feasible? How many times should they come in? How do we actually, minimize what's not important and optimize what is important? And I think it's just really that, like, listening to the patient up front and executing on it. It's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to actually talk to folks. And I think that's been the key to probably a lot of my success in rare disease as well, is really understanding these folks.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. And any other thoughts, Lisa? Anything else on your mind as you've been going through the show these last couple of days?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. It's been really exciting. It's been nice to actually see people and meet people in person. There are folks that I've been doing business with the last 3 years that I now see in person, and it's nice to be able to actually engage and talk to them. I think that kind of balance of being able to effectively work and operationally execute, but then being able to get together in a forum like this, it's exciting. It renews my energy, and I think it probably does that for a lot of folks. And so I think it's great. I mean, it's intense, it's tiring. It really is oftentimes like speed dating in terms of meeting folks, and everyone's, I'm sure, exhausted and gonna hopefully take the weekend off. But it's been a very fruitful, great meeting. And I love the fact that, it's an event where small companies, big companies, medium-sized companies that are focused in healthcare can kind of all come together and try and find the right people and the right partnerships. So I've really enjoyed it thus far.
Awesome. Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.